A locked room, a dead man, two obvious suspects with perfect alibis. The real killer was the one person everyone forgot to suspect.
The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Thornewood Manor like accusatory fingers. Detective Sarah Chen stood in the doorway of the study, her shoes leaving wet prints on the mahogany floor of the hallway behind her. Before her lay a scene of eerie tranquility that would haunt her for years to come. Marcus Thornewood sat slumped in his leather chair, his head tilted back as if contemplating the coffered ceiling. A crystal tumbler rested on the desk beside him, a finger of amber liquid still pooled at the bottom. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, almost serene. If not for the unnatural stillness of his chest and the faint blue tinge to his lips, he might have been sleeping. Time of death estimated between 10 p.m. and midnight, said the medical examiner, Dr. Patel, crouching beside the body. No signs of struggle, no visible wounds. My preliminary guess, poisoning, something fast-acting in that drink most likely. Detective Chen's partner, Robert Mills, stood by the door they'd had to force open. The lock was engaged from the inside, Sarah. Chain bolt, too. Windows are sealed shut, haven't been opened in years by the look of the paint. No other exits. Sarah knelt beside the desk, her eyes scanning methodically. A letter opener, a fountain pen, a leather-bound journal, closed, and there, a photograph, face down on the desk blotter. She turned it over with gloved hands. The image showed Marcus with his arm around a striking woman, his wife, Vivienne. They were younger, happier, before everything fell apart. Detective? A uniformed officer appeared at the door. The family is assembled in the drawing room. They're not taking it well. Sarah stood, her jaw set. Let's find out who wanted Marcus Thornewood dead badly enough to create an impossible murder. The drawing room at Thornewood Manor felt oppressive despite its grand proportions. Rain streaked the tall windows, and the fire in the hearth did little to warm the chill that hung over the assembled family and friends. Sarah took them in one by one, reading grief and guilt in equal measure on their faces. Vivienne Thornewood sat on the silk sofa, her beauty marred by smudged mascara and red-rimmed eyes. At 42, she possessed the kind of elegance that came from old money and good breeding. Her hands trembled as they gripped a handkerchief. "My husband is dead. We had our difficulties, but I loved him. I still love him." Beside her, keeping a careful distance, sat Jonathan Hale, Marcus's best friend since college, 45, athletic build, wearing guilt like a second skin. His eyes couldn't meet the detective's gaze. "Marcus and we'd known each other for 25 years, he said quietly. "He was like a brother to me." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Catherine Thornewood, Marcus's younger sister, sat collapsed in a wing-back chair near the fireplace, her face buried in her hands. At 38, she shared her brother's sharp features and penetrating gray eyes. Her shoulders shook with violent sobs that seemed to tear through her entire body. I can't believe he's gone," she choked out between gasps. "Marcus was everything to me. After our parents died, he raised me. He was my brother, my father, my best friend, all in one. How am I supposed to go on without him?" A maid stood nearby, helplessly offering smelling salts. Catherine waved her away weakly, her grief so raw and consuming that even Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. This was not the composure of someone with something to hide. This was devastation in its purest form. Sarah's attention shifted to Philip Ashcroft, Marcus's business partner, a portly man in his 50s with nervous hands and a receding hairline. He paced near the window, unable to stay still. "The company, Thornewood and Ashcroft Financial, it's worth millions," he admitted when pressed. "Marcus and I had disagreements about its direction, serious disagreements, but murder? That's insane." Finally, there was Elena Vasquez, Marcus's executive assistant of 5 years, 30, shark-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She sat apart from the others, composed but watchful. "Mr. Thornewood trusted me with everything, his schedule, his correspondence, his business affairs. He was a demanding employer, but fair. I had no reason to want him dead." Sarah let the silence stretch, watching them all. "Here's what we know," she said finally. 3 days ago, Marcus discovered his wife and his best friend engaged in an affair. He witnessed them together in the woods behind the property. That night, he confronted them both. Is this correct?" Vivian's composure cracked. A sob escaped her throat. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. Catherine's weeping intensified. "How could you? How could you do that to him? He loved you, Vivian. He trusted you, Jonathan. You both destroyed him." "It's true," Vivian said, her voice breaking. "It was a terrible mistake. We tried to explain, to apologize. Marcus was devastated. He said he'd never forgive us. He said—" She stopped, unable to continue. "He said he'd make sure we paid," Jonathan finished quietly. "He was furious, rightfully so. But, Detective, neither Vivian nor I killed him. We couldn't have. We both have alibis for last night." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "We were together," Vivian admitted, shame flooding her face, "at Jonathan's apartment downtown. We arrived at 8 p.m. and didn't leave until this morning when Catherine telephoned about Marcus." "Witnesses?" "The doorman. His name is Albert Brennan. He's worked at the Kensington Apartments for 15 years. He signed us in to the guest register when we arrived at 8:05 p.m.
The elevator operator, James, took us to the 6th floor. My neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, in apartment 6B, heard us talking through the wall around 11 p.m. She'll confirm we were there. We never left. Sarah made notes, though her expression revealed nothing. "And the rest of you, where were you last night between 10 p.m. and midnight?" Catherine looked up, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. "I was here," she said, her voice hoarse, "in the guest wing. Marcus had invited me to stay. He needed family around him after discovering their betrayal." She gestured weakly at Vivian and Jonathan. "I went to bed around 9:30. I heard nothing. If I'd known, if I'd just checked on him." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was sleeping while my brother was dying." Philip Ashcroft cleared his throat. "I was at my home office working on quarterly reports. My wife brought me tea around 10:30. She can confirm it." Elena Vasquez met Sarah's eyes steadily. "I left the office at 6 p.m., stopped at the gymnasium on 5th Street, then went home to my apartment. I live alone, so no one can verify my whereabouts after 8 p.m. Sarah closed her notebook. "We'll be checking all of these alibis. In the meantime, no one leaves town. We'll need to speak with each of you individually." Over the next 2 days, Sarah and Mills pieced together a portrait of a man betrayed, a family fractured, and motives that ran deeper than the surface suggested. The investigation into Thornewood and Ashcroft Financial revealed cracks in the foundation. Philip Ashcroft had been making unauthorized investments, risky moves that had paid off but could have destroyed the company. Marcus had discovered the irregularities and was planning to force Ashcroft out. Marcus threatened to expose me, Ashcroft admitted during his interview, sweat beading on his forehead. But I didn't kill him. Those investments made us millions. I was trying to save the company, not destroy it. Elena Vasquez's story was more complicated than it appeared. Bank records showed Marcus had recently transferred $50,000 to her account. When confronted, she broke down. "It was a loan," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My mother needed surgery. I asked Marcus for help, and he gave it without hesitation. But he made me promise not to tell anyone. He didn't want others thinking he was soft. I was paying it back in installments. The last thing I wanted was for him to die before I could repay my debt." Catherine remained inconsolable. Sarah interviewed her in the Manor's conservatory, where she sat staring blankly at the rain. "He was all I had," Catherine whispered. "Our parents died in an automobile accident when I was 12. Marcus was 16. He could have sent me to boarding school, to distant relatives, but he didn't. He kept me with him, raised him himself, put me through college, helped me get my position at the museum. He sacrificed so much for me," Catherine continued, her voice thick with emotion. "He delayed his own marriage plans by 5 years to make sure I was settled first. He paid for everything. I owed him my entire life." She looked at Sarah with red-rimmed eyes. "And I failed him. I was sleeping under his own roof while someone murdered him." Despite their alibis checking out, the doorman confirmed their arrival, the guest register showed their signatures, and Mrs. Hartwick verified hearing voices from Jonathan's apartment around 11 p.m. Vivian and Jonathan remained the prime suspects in Mills' eyes. "The spurned wife inherits everything," Mills argued. "That's motive enough." But Sarah frowned. "Actually, we need to check that. Get me Marcus's will." The preliminary toxicology report confirmed cyanide poisoning, and a search of Jonathan's darkroom had turned up something damning, a bottle of potassium cyanide among his photography chemicals. "I use it for gold-toning prints, and I haven't used that bottle in months. The seal isn't even broken." Sarah stood in Marcus's study for the third time, trying to make sense of the impossible. The door had been locked and chained from the inside. The windows were painted shut. The floor was solid marble, no trapdoors. The walls were thick stone, no hidden passages. Dr. Patel's autopsy report confirmed cyanide poisoning. Time of death between 10:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. The poison had been in the whiskey. Traces remained in the tumbler. But the bottle of whiskey tested negative for poison. Only the glass contained cyanide. "Someone poisoned the drink," Sarah murmured. "But how did they get out of a locked room?" Her telephone rang. The forensic laboratory. "Detective Chen? The chain bolt. We found microscopic scratches and traces of beeswax. Someone manipulated it from outside using fishing line." Sarah hung up. The locked room wasn't impossible after all. Then Mills called. "Sarah, you need to hear this. I just spoke with Marcus's attorney, Gerald Whitmore. You won't believe what he told me."
Sarah met with attorney Gerald Whitmore in his oak-paneled office. The elderly lawyer looked uncomfortable, his fingers drumming on his desk. "I wasn't sure if I should mention this," he began. "Attorney-client privilege extends beyond death in most circumstances, but in a murder investigation—" He sighed. "2 days after discovering the affair, Marcus came to see me. He wanted to change his will." Sarah leaned forward. "Go on." "He was in a state I'd never seen before, absolutely shattered. He said he wanted Vivian completely disinherited. Everything. The manor, the company shares, his investment portfolio, worth approximately $47 million, would go to his sister, Catherine. Did he tell Catherine about this change? Whitmore shook his head firmly. That's the thing. He made me swear not to tell anyone, especially not Catherine. He said she'd try to talk me out of it. She'd say I was being rash, but I know what I'm doing. Vivian deserves nothing. So Catherine doesn't know she's the heir? I doubt it. Marcus was very clear. The will was to remain sealed until after his death. He didn't want Catherine feeling obligated or grateful while he was alive. He said he'd lived his whole life with Catherine feeling like she owed him something, and he didn't want to add to that burden. Sarah sat back, her mind racing. When exactly did he make this change? On Monday afternoon, 2 days after the confrontation. The ink is barely dry on the new will. Did anyone else know? His assistant? Business partner? No one. Marcus came alone during my lunch hour. He specifically requested privacy. He even made me promise not to tell my secretary the purpose of his visit. Sarah reviewed her notes. If Catherine didn't know about the will, then she had no obvious motive. The grief-stricken sister who'd lost everything, it seemed genuine, because from her perspective it was. But then Sarah remembered something. Mr. Whitmore, who brought him to your office? Did he drive himself? Whitmore paused. Actually, no. Now that you mention it, his sister brought him. Catherine was waiting in the car. Marcus told me she'd been helping him through this difficult time, driving him places because he was too upset to focus on the road. But he came into my office alone. Sarah's pulse quickened. Did Catherine ask what the meeting was about? She did. I told her, as I told him, that it was confidential legal business. She seemed to accept that. But Sarah was already thinking, what if Catherine hadn't accepted it? What if she'd guessed? Or worse, what if she'd found out somehow? Mr. Whitmore, where do you keep the will? Where in my office safe? Why? Has anyone asked about it since Marcus's death? Whitmore's face went pale. Yes, Catherine called yesterday. She said she needed to know about estate matters, about how to handle Marcus's affairs. I told her we'd discuss it after the investigation concluded. Sarah returned to the precinct and spread the evidence across her desk. Something wasn't adding up. Catherine's grief appeared genuine, the kind that couldn't be faked. The violent sobbing, the collapse in the chair, the raw emotion when confronting Vivian and Jonathan. But what if that grief was real? What if Catherine truly loved her brother, but loved something else more? Sarah began investigating Catherine's finances. What she found was troubling. Catherine's salary as a museum curator was modest. She lived in a small apartment, drove an old automobile, had minimal savings. Bank records showed she'd borrowed $15,000 from Marcus 6 months ago to cover debts from a failed investment. She was paying it back slowly, $200 a month. At that rate, it would take 6 years. Then Sarah found something else, a copy of a telegram in Marcus's files, sent from Catherine 3 weeks ago. Desperate situation, investment went terribly wrong, may lose apartment, too ashamed to ask again, don't know what to do. Marcus had telegrammed back, you never have to be ashamed with me. We'll figure it out together. Come stay at the manor for a while. Sarah called the museum where Catherine worked. The curator seemed surprised. Leave of absence? No, detective. Catherine requested a 2-week vacation last month. She said it was personal. But Catherine had told them she'd taken a leave to comfort Marcus after discovering the affair. That was only 3 days ago. Sarah pulled out Marcus's journal, the leather-bound book they'd found locked in his study.
She'd read the final entry, but now she went back further. 3 weeks ago, Catherine came to visit. She seemed troubled about money again. I worry for her. I've given her so much over the years. Why does she struggle so? Perhaps I should have taught her better financial management instead of just solving her problems for her. 2 weeks ago, Catherine is staying at the manor now. She says she needs family time, but I sense there's something she's not telling me. She keeps asking about my estate planning, about what would happen to Vivian if something happened to me. Strange questions. 1 week ago, terrible day, discovered Vivian and Jonathan in the woods, confronted them. I've never felt such betrayal. Called Catherine. She came immediately. She's been so supportive, but 5 days ago, Catherine drove me to the attorney's office today. I changed my will. Everything goes to her now. She doesn't know, I didn't tell her. But outside the office, she asked what I'd done. I said it was confidential business. She looked, I can't describe it. Hopeful? Hungry? I must be imagining things in my state of mind. 3 days ago, I've been watching Catherine, the way she looks at the manor, at my things. Am I being paranoid? She's been wonderful through this nightmare, but something feels off. She keeps asking how I'm feeling, if I've forgiven Vivian yet.
2 days ago, Catherine came to my study tonight. She didn't know I saw her, but she was at my desk, looking through papers. When I coughed, she jumped, said she was looking for writing paper. But my desk? Why not ask? I'm starting to wonder. Last entry, the day he died. Catherine came to see me again today. She's been wonderful through this nightmare, but sometimes I wonder if she's pushing too hard for me to stay angry at Vivian. She keeps saying they don't deserve your forgiveness, and you did the right thing. But how does she know what I did? I never told her about the will. Did she overhear something at the attorney's office? Or am I just being paranoid? She's my sister. She loves me. But something feels off. Sarah stared at the journal. Marcus had suspected something, but he died before he could figure out what. She called Whitmore again. The day Marcus came to your office, could Catherine have overheard anything? The windows were open, Whitmore said slowly. It was a warm day. She was in the car directly below my office window. If she'd been listening. Sarah made one more call. The photography supply store on Market Street. Yes, Detective, I remember the sale. 3 weeks ago. A woman, nervous, paid cash for potassium cyanide, said her brother needed it for photography work but couldn't come himself. I have her signature on the purchase log. It's required for poison sales. What name did she give? Catherine Ashford. She spelled it out for me. Sarah's blood ran cold. Catherine had purchased the poison 3 weeks before Marcus discovered the affair. She'd already been planning this. The affair was just the perfect cover, the perfect opportunity to frame the obvious suspects. Sarah called an unusual meeting at Thornewood Manor, all 5 suspects in the drawing room. Catherine sat in the same chair, her face still showing signs of grief, red eyes, pale complexion. When Sarah entered, she looked up hopefully, desperately. Have you found who killed my brother? Sarah felt a chill. The performance was flawless. I have, Sarah said. But first, I need to ask you something, Catherine. Did you know your brother changed his will? Catherine's face showed perfect confusion. His will? No. I assumed everything would go to Vivian, as it should. She's his wife. Actually, everything goes to you. $47 million. He changed it 2 days after discovering the affair. Catherine's face went through a carefully orchestrated series of emotions: shock, disbelief, confusion. That's
"That's not possible. He would have told me. He wouldn't have done that without telling me." "He specifically requested that you not be told. He didn't want you feeling obligated while he was alive." And there, for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Catherine's face. Not surprise, not confusion, relief. "But you already knew, didn't you?" Sarah said quietly. "You overheard through the attorney's window, or perhaps you guessed when Marcus wouldn't tell you what the meeting was about. Either way, you knew." Catherine's expression remained perfectly composed. "This is absurd. I had no idea." "Then explain why you purchased potassium cyanide 3 weeks ago from Brennan's photography supply. The clerk has your signature on the poison log." The room went silent. Catherine's carefully maintained facade began to crack. "And explain," Sarah continued, "why you told us you'd taken a leave of absence from the museum when you actually requested vacation 3 weeks ago, before Marcus discovered the affair. Explain why your brother's journal shows you asking about estate planning and inheritances weeks before Vivian's betrayal gave him a reason to change his will. Explain the fishing line coated with beeswax we found in the trash chute, matching the residue on gloves in your room. Explain how your fingerprints are on the poisoned glass Marcus used the night he died, fresh prints, not old ones." Sarah stood slowly. Her face had transformed. The grief was gone, replaced with something cold and calculating. "You don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly steady, controlled. "None of you understand what it was like." The raw emotion was still there, but it was different now. Not grief, but rage. "I was 12 years old when our parents died. 12, and everyone praised Marcus for raising me. What a wonderful brother, they'd say. So selfless. But I was the one who sacrificed. I had to be grateful every single day. Grateful for food, for shelter, for education. I could never be angry, never complain, never be anything but the perfect, grateful little sister. For 26 years I lived in his shadow. He had everything: success, wealth, respect, love, and I had nothing but debt and a modest salary and an obligation I could never repay. Then, 3 weeks ago, he told me he was worried about me, worried about my finances. He said maybe he'd enabled me too much, that I needed to learn to stand on my own. He was going to cut me off." Her voice cracked. "After everything I'd endured, he was going to cut me off. So I started planning. I researched poisons, bought the cyanide, practiced with the fishing line. I needed a trigger, an opportunity, and then Vivian handed it to me. When Marcus discovered the affair, he called me sobbing, and I saw my chance. I drove him to the attorney, encouraged his anger, made sure he disinherited Vivian. I listened through the window and heard him name me heir. But then I watched him start to soften. He was going to forgive her. I saw it happening. That journal entry. He was starting to suspect me. Another week and he'd change the will again. I couldn't let that happen." "So yes, I killed him," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face now, but these were tears of rage, not grief. "I went to his study that night. I hid in the shadows. I'd already poisoned a clean tumbler with the cyanide. When he poured his whiskey, I switched the glasses. I watched him drink. I watched him die. And you know what?" Her voice broke. "I felt relief. Finally, I'd be free. Free of the obligation, the gratitude, the shadow. I'd have everything he had. I'd be the one people envied." "I loved my brother," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I truly did, but I loved the idea of freedom more. And I'm not sorry. I'm only sorry I got caught." The confession hung in the air like poison. Sarah nodded to the officers, who moved to arrest Catherine. As they led her away, Catherine looked back at Vivian and Jonathan. "You helped me, you know," she said coldly. "If you'd kept your hands off each other, I'd have had to wait years for my inheritance. You gave me the perfect cover, the perfect suspects, so thank you." 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in Gerald Whitmore's office as he explained the legal implications. The will is void. When a beneficiary murders the testator, they're legally barred from inheriting. Under intestate succession law, Vivian inherits everything. Vivian sat across from him, her face gray. "I don't want it. The money, the house, it's all stained with blood." "You could donate it," Whitmore suggested gently. "Establish a foundation in Marcus's name." Jonathan sat beside her, but they weren't touching. The guilt between them was a chasm that would never close. 1 month later, Sarah returned to Thornewood Manor one final time. The house was being prepared for sale. She stood in the study where Marcus had died, thinking about the case. Catherine's grief had been real. She'd truly loved her brother. But that love had been poisoned by 26 years of resentment, of feeling obligated, of living in someone else's shadow. The sister he trusted most had been his executioner, and she'd almost gotten away with it by hiding behind the obvious suspects and performing the perfect grief, a grief that was genuine even as she committed murder. Some betrayals run deeper than affairs, Sarah thought. Some wounds are inflicted by the people we trust most, the family we never think to question. And sometimes the most dangerous love is the love that comes with conditions, with obligations, with gratitude demanded rather than freely given. Catherine Thornewood was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Vivian established the Marcus Thornewood Foundation for Family Support Services, donating the entire inheritance. And in an evidence room downtown, Marcus's journal remained, a warning written too late.
The end. Did you solve it before the detective did? If you enjoyed this mystery, subscribe for more twisted tales, locked room murders, and secrets hiding in simple sight. More mysteries coming soon.